Good morning, everyone. Good to be back here again this Sunday. I know by now a lot of you are probably getting cabin fever, or somebody said here in a couple more weeks we'll know everybody's real hair color. I am accidentally growing a mullet, I think. But at any rate, we're still going strong, and we're glad that you tuned in this morning for just a few minutes. A week after Easter, and we're still facing a lot of problems in America and around the world. But can you imagine what the disciples were thinking a week after the resurrection? Well, the Bible tells us that Peter, for one, and the others were fishermen when they became disciples. And after Jesus died and rose again, they didn't know exactly what to do. So Peter said, I'm going fishing. Now, I don't know about you, but I like fishing. And my grandson, he likes fishing. He went at the neighbor's house here the last few weeks. Him and all the kids went fishing, catching some fish. And so one day this week, he found a couple fishing poles that were old and rusty and were of no use. And he decided, I'm going to fix these things up. So he brought them over to the house, and he took them all apart and began soaking them in some kind of magic juice, and I don't know what all it was, but I thought, well, I'll just clean them off the table the next day or two. But the next day, they were all fixed. He had them ready to go, and he was ready to go fishing at the pond and catch a load of fish. Well, Peter, I think, was quite distraught whenever Jesus had died on the cross, and he had denied him, and he didn't know exactly what to do, so he just kind of threw his hands up and said, I'm going fishing. Over in John 21 today, I want to kind of read that story to you. And we probably have a lot of people that do a lot of fishing out there, and I like to fish myself. I like to go where Montauk, where they release them, and they run all over the place, and you can't help but to catch them. But sometimes they're hard to catch. But over in John chapter 21, Jesus appeared again to his disciples by the Sea of Galilee. And it so happened that Simon Peter, Thomas, also known as Didymus, and also the sons of Zebedee, they all said, I'm going to go out and fish. And Simon, they went with him, Simon Peter. So they went out, it says, and got into the boat. And that night they fished all night and caught nothing. And that was unusual because, you would think it'd probably be fishing season or they wouldn't have gone. And I'm sure they had signs on the side of the boat that says fish welcome here or whatever. But they didn't catch anything. Well, in chapter 4, early the next morning, Jesus stood at the shore, but the disciples did not realize who he was at first. And he called out to them. He said in verse 6, throw your net on the other side. And so the disciples probably thought, well, what's this guy know about fishing? If you can't catch him on this side, how are you going to catch him on that side? But they did like he said. The disciples threw their nets on the other side, and Peter realized that it was the Lord speaking to him. Simon Peter heard in verse 7 him say, it is me, the Lord. He wrapped his outer garment around him, and it said in verse 8, the disciples followed in the boat, towing out on the other side. They caught a bunch of fish, so many fish, they couldn't even drag them in. They had to, in the boat, they had to drag them to the shore, following the boat. And they saw the fire of burning coals. It says, there was so many fish, burning coals, so many fish in it, and also some bread. And Jesus said to them, bring some of the fish you have just caught. So Peter climbed back into the boat. He dragged the net ashore, and it was full of large fish. Approximately 150 or so fish in there, it says, 153. Verse 12, Jesus said, he said to them, now come and have breakfast. And none of the disciples dared ask him, who are you? Because they knew it was the Lord. Now in verse 14, this was now the third time Jesus appeared to his disciples after he raised from the dead. Now let me kind of put this in perspective for us today. Sometimes things aren't going right. They weren't catching any fish. Sometimes, as I talked about last week, we have bumps in the road, and we have to get over those. And sometimes we go fishing and we don't catch anything. I was reading, a friend of mine sent me an article from the Word and Way in 1958. And it was an article about Pastor Crow, who pastored at Saline Baptist Church. And they baptized 19 that year, in 1958. And then I had an article from 1998 that said we baptized, I believe it was a dozen, when I first came as pastor there. And so in that 40 years of time, the message was still the same. And even though Jesus died on the cross, he rose again, and the message was still the same. He said, I am the way, I'm the truth, I'm the life. No one cometh to the Father except by me. And a lot of times we would like to hang out on the church door, sinners, come on in and get saved. But Jesus says, no, we should go out and cast our nets. And if you don't do any good on this side, go to the other side. Anywhere that anyone is lost, everyone needs a Savior. Everyone needs Jesus. And I think the disciples realized that day that they were fishers of men now. They were going to go out and they were going to have to tell others about the gospel. And sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it starts to work. And then you have to move to the other side. And you find people there who need the Lord. We used to sing that song years ago, people need the Lord. Guess what? They needed him back in the 1950s. They need him back in the 1900s. They need him today in 2020. We need the Lord more than ever before. And so if you get discouraged because things are not going right, or you feel like your church is not doing enough for the Lord, then maybe it's time we look to different ways and cast our net in different directions in order that we can see more people baptized and saved and won to Jesus. Don't be discouraged. There's a lot of fish out there that need to be caught. God bless you, and have a good week, and go fishing.